there's no one in your organization, if it's a decent size, that's not using Copilot. Some form of AI generated, it doesn't have to be Copilot specifically, but definitely a AI generated helping you code.
I guess we shouldn't really have a job in the first place if they were just doing their thing.
I prefer the security should be invisible versus security should not exist. A couple photos sent to the right people will get you arrested, will get you thrown in jail, will get you thrown in a court case. And you can just do this by just click, gen.
BlackHat is probably the underground cybersecurity. It is part of one of the popular cybersecurity conferences out there where a lot of CISOs, a lot of technical practitioners, they all go. And BlackHat 2024 was not a disappointment at all. They had AI Summit, they had Founders Summit, they had CISO Summit. They also had a lot of conversations about AI Village, which was in DEF CON as well. So in this episode with Caleb and myself, we basically look back on BlackHat 2024, especially the AI parts of it. For example, what were some of the themes at the AI Summit? What were some of the things that CISOs were concerned about as they were walking down the floors and trying to find out from other CISOs, hey, what you should be doing? Also, a brief teaser onto a panel that we did with the CISO of DeepMind, Anthropic, and we have a conversation hopefully lined up with OpenAI's CISO soon as well. But at the moment, these are some of the learnings we had from BlackHat. And it was definitely, let's just say, interesting on where we landed on, especially now with the US election being this year and deepfake being top of mind for a lot of people. Also, whether there are actual use cases that people can walk away with that they can implement in the cybersecurity platforms. We also spoke about the 3 broad use cases that I found out as people should be concerned or looking into for the security programs, especially if you're looking from a tooling perspective. All that and a lot more in this episode of AI Cybersecurity Podcast. If you know someone who is looking into building an AI cybersecurity program or is a leader, CISO who's just curious about this and wants to know what happened at BlackHat from an AI perspective, this is the episode with them. Please do share it with them. If you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn, give us a follow and subscribe because that lets the algorithm know that, hey, there are people like AI Cybersecurity Podcast who are talking about cybersecurity in a way that it's not Skynet. And in case you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, definitely leave us a review rating because it helps more people find out about us and let people know about the good work we're doing here. I appreciate all the support you give me, Caleb, Shilpi, and the rest of the AI Cybersecurity Podcast team. It definitely means a lot that you've been talking about us, and I'm so happy to see a lot of you at BlackHat. Hello, welcome to another episode of AI Cybersecurity Podcast. So Caleb and I are going to say fresh off the board. Sounds pretty wrong. Fresh off the BlackHat board is how I would describe it. So today we're talking about BlackHat, which is Hacker Summer Camp for people who are not aware of. Maybe to set the scene, Caleb, because you've been going there longer than I have. How would you describe BlackHat to people who have never been there?
I explain it this way. Actually, I'm going to do it with more of an overall security conference. There are 2, let's say, major accepted. I don't know if they technically are the largest security conferences in security, but RSA and BlackHat, right? I feel are the 2 major biggest security conferences that are held. And so RSA for sure is in the bucket of business deals get done, very high level, very, I would say, maybe more somewhat practitioner focused business problems. That's what everything is revolved around versus BlackHat is supposed to be hacker, tinker, underground focus, the core of where cybersecurity comes from, right? Which is I'm really focused on being able to reverse engineer, exploit focused, vulnerability focused. That's where BlackHat has generally been. Although when you look at, there's also DEF CON, which is like also now more hacker security focused. It's funny because it used to be BlackHat used to be the best of the best vulnerability security research. Right. That's what it used to be premier. If you spoke at BlackHat, that's because the topic of was like, oh, you found an exploit in all of DNS or all of Cisco routers or whatever these things are. And it was the premier. But now BlackHat has become more like RSA. So it's more business focused. It's more about vendors. It's more about getting deals done. And then DEF CON, which used to be way more scrappy, way more like black leather kind of piercings hanging out in the hallways, which it still is a little bit, but it's becoming DEF CON's the new BlackHat. So,
yeah.
And CISOs is now the new DEF CON. And it's funny to see the evolution of these things come together over time.
When was your first BlackHat out of curiosity?
I feel like my first BlackHat had to be in, maybe 1999 or 2000.
99. I'm not going to age myself there. talking about what I was doing in 99. But to add to what you were just saying as well, I met people who've been there for, I think, I want to say 20 years. Would that be around the
Yeah,
same?
yeah, 2024. So yeah, I
Yeah.
would
So
even longer. For sure, 2000, I was there to 2001 for sure.
this is probably a good segue to talk about some of the other things that developed as well. So we had the AI Summit. We also had the Entrepreneur Summit or Founders Summit. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, so we had two. No, so at BlackHat, we had the Investor and Innovator Summit, which is basically investors and founders. And then we had the CISO Summit. But there's a lot of other summits. There is AI Summit. There's like insurance, cyber insurance summit. There's the briefings. There's the trainings. So there's a lot of that is going
I
on.
think
But
the reason I was talking about that is because I guess because this was the first year for the Investor Summit to run as well, Investors and Founder Summit. I think this is probably the second time the AI Summit was running as well. I primarily was either floating between the AI Summit and just Black Hat floor in general. And it was really interesting. I think I would be curious, where were you floating around and what were some of the AI conversation that came out?
BlackHat for me is a very different beast because I am on the board for both the CISO Summit and the Innovators and Investors Summit. And especially the Innovators and Investors, this was our first year in launching that. So I helped with many others to help create that summit. And so I was also the main moderator of that summit.
Oh,
So
right. Okay.
yeah. And also the CISO Summit. And the thing is, like, BlackHat this year, decided to host both summits at the exact same time and on complete opposite ends of the conference. Like the CISO Summit was at the Four Seasons, the Founder Investor
Oh, wow.
Summit was at BlackHat all the way in the back corner. And so I was running. It's literally like 25-minute walk to go back and forth between these two. There was a time where I had to run from the investors, I literally jog through the hotel to the Four Seasons to get to a talk that I needed to go attend because I helped put together, which was the AI security talk at the CISO Summit. And so I was like running to the other side. It was very painful.
The CISO Summit is primarily Chatham rules, so we can't specifically talk about what the answers were. But were there themes that came out of the questions that we can share for the audience to at least get a viewpoint on what were some of the top of mind topics for people? Obviously, we don't have to share any answers, but curious about the top of mind topic, which is without obviously breaking the Chatham rules.
Yeah, I think we made one with all the panelists except for one, Matt from OpenAI. Right?
Yes.
But basically, yeah, the panel was the CISOs from Anthropic, DeepMind, OpenAI, and we had a couple other people. We basically, the panel was put together and the focus was around what are the practical things that you really need to worry about, right? Every CISO is dealing with these things. They are dealing with OpenAI, Anthropic, and DeepMind, right? There's no question every enterprise right now is dealing with that. And what are the concerns? What are the thoughts? What are the strategies? And so I think really a focus in having those three there and that they are CISOs themselves. And how do they think about security and the challenges?
Yeah, and the panel is coming out, I think, after potentially this episode goes out as well. But so that would be interesting. We were able to get, fortunately, as the timing worked out, we had the Anthropic CISO, the DeepMind CISO, and Christian was there as well. We had a great chat about the use cases and everything else. So I'll definitely put a link to the episode here somewhere in the show notes so that people can watch it if they're getting to this one first. Something that was interesting for me in all the conversations that you and sparked by what you just said right now, that every CISO is dealing with OpenAI as well as Anthropic in some way, shape, or form. A lot of people that I spoke to, some of them were CISOs, some of them directors and VPs, they were a bit hesitant to talk about what their AI platform for, whether they're using a foundational model or whether they are multimodal or not, on all of that. But they felt definitely concerned about the security. And I think where I'm going with this is that a lot of them felt they knew what AI was running, but they did not confirm or deny that it was OpenAI or Anthropic. And I'm like, what else could you be, unless you're creating your own, which requires technically hundreds of millions of dollars. None of these people work for companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars. So I guess my question is, for people who are saying that, and when other CISOs hear this, my thinking at that point goes, oh, are you using like an open source version? Or option B, you have no idea.
I think it usually falls in option B. Here's the thing. It's like the majority of CISOs, 98% of their time is dealing with a lot of stuff that ain't this, right? And most CISOs do not have the capability to go and dig deep and understand any of these things at any level of scale. What they tend to do is, because of the lack of time, they have to go based off of sort of their circle of friends around what are they saying, what are they dealing with, and looking towards pointers and advice for them to help figure out what to go do. So, for example, they may know in the enterprise that by far they generally will know we are using Google DeepMind or something, we're using OpenAI or using it. Like, they generally at least have that, but not
Yeah.
necessarily the details of how. Are
Yeah.
they concerned from an employee's using it from a consumer perspective? Are we using it from an enterprise development application perspective, and at what level of detail? Generally, I think most CISOs won't have that level of detail. They know it's scattered everywhere. They know that it's happening. Usage is going on. They're trying to wrap their heads around what is the usage where. And by the way, in most organizations, it's probably mixed, right? There's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of OpenAI, a lot of Anthropic, a lot of Llama. There's
Yeah.
probably a bunch of things everywhere in any decent sized organization that's being used, but they don't know that detail. They're trying to figure out where is it and what is it that's being used right now. Yeah.
Oh, actually, were there any, to your point about where and how, in any of the conversations you had, did it come out in terms of the business use cases for how AI is being used and if it's at all being used for security? Or yeah, curious to know if any, and because I've got 3 examples that I was solid, but I'm curious as to what you came up with.
Yeah, I feel like the maturity of security teams using AI is getting a little bit better. Like, the number one thing that I've been hearing is about looking at GitHub commits, code
Yeah.
commits, and
Yeah.
identifying issues and giving smart remediation recommendations to some of the more advanced that are actually giving the recommendation of the code itself. And here is the fix.
Yeah.
So I think that has been a very consistent one. The other one, which I actually predicted in my talk that I gave at B-Sides earlier this year, that I'm seeing a lot of pickup on it, is the sort of revival of chat ops and using LLMs to reach out to employees and have discussions about a alert detection vulnerability. Hey, we identified this thing. We think this is high. What's your thoughts on it? Like, these kinds of integrations are happening for sure. So those were the two that I think were the most consistent. There's a lot of discussion of SecOps and consumer products like dropzone.ai, and a lot of people talking about how does this stuff get automated, which obviously we talked to Edward on our call on this stuff. So there is a lot of focus on people talking about SecOps automation in AI, but I haven't talked to anyone who's implemented it and said, oh my God, this is the stuff. But there's definitely a lot of chatter around it.
For the other podcast we have, Cloud Security Podcast, we had an analyst from Forrester, and she was talking about how the SecOps automation, as people are thinking about AI, may not truly be as what they think that the answer is. It's not going to be the SOAR that people are hoping it would become. So anyway, I would not spoil the conversation for people. I'll definitely let them check out the episode, and I'll probably link it somewhere as well.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, if you want to talk about that, then that's a whole different road. But yeah, I can talk about that.
Yeah, that's right. We'll go in a very different direction. I mean, because then there was a conversation with SentinelOne on their purple AI pieces and how they're doing I think they're calling it the MDR space, how they're evolving that. So anyway, I think the whole conversation, the 3 themes, so coming back to what I came across talking to people who are probably in the space. One was around, I think, which linked to what you said about the GitHub commits. There was a growing concern at the same time awareness of the fact that GitHub came up with a report that over 40% of their new commits was all AI generated. And this is for people are going, okay, and this is actually being committed into the repository. This is not just generated, it's committed into the repository, which obviously meant either, and this is, by the way, one of the largest source code repository on the internet saying they have over 40%. And this was something very fascinating. And most of the people that I spoke to, they all agreed that they do believe there is some form of co-pilot being used by a developer. Now,
actually, my question to that, I didn't read the report, but did they say how they determined it was AI generated commit?
No, I didn't read that either. So I know and the reason I know is because I think it's in their quarterly report. It wasn't like a GitHub AI report. It was a report by Microsoft on their GitHub business kind of a thing. That's but it's a good point. I can definitely look it up as well as to how they create, because I imagine
Copilot makes the most sense for sure. But I guess the question is, there's a difference between AI writing the code, auto committing it on behalf of AI versus AI assisted, right? I am using Copilot. I'm writing this thing and
And
I'm
then
submitting it as a commit, but yet somehow they're saying, oh, the code that was written is clearly AI written, right? That those are
yeah,
very
that
different.
41% is AI generated autonomously. That's the word I was looking for. And they are saying it's GitHub Copilot,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
is saying it's generated. It's not committed. So I stand corrected. I just brought it up. And the number keeps changing depending on how recent you are. Now they're saying 50%. So okay, clearly there is.
The end result of this is we all knew that AI is going to increase the amount of code being generated. The amount of code being generated is going to triple, quadruple because of AI. That is a very safe bet to make, right?
100%. And I
Yeah.
would also add to this that the concern that people had over there was, hey, as long as it is Copilot that they have license for and that they understand at least there's a relationship there, it's more the Olamas or open models that claim to help the developers and perhaps junior developers a lot more who may not want to ask the question to a senior developer, hey, how do I add this particular statement in Java? They go, actually, I'm just going to ask the free version because they wouldn't want to pay for a service. And how comfortable would they be able to use a Copilot, whether it's even encouraged or it's a more hush? That was one of the first concern, that at least the first use case that I came across. There was another one which went into the API gateway. On the whole approach, for the concern that people had was more around the API gateway use case where, hey, now that I know that I am producing these APIs, how am I providing this to either to the rest of the organization or to a third party? The chatbots who you were referring to as well, they're all API calls being made as well. How's that going? And someone is basically checking and validating input and output coming back as well. I don't know if you
Yeah.
have some thoughts on that, but that definitely seemed like oh yeah, I can see why people are focusing on that. Whether the security people are aware of it, there was very small percentage that actually spoke about it into that detail. So I felt, oh, they have gone a layer deeper than the people who are talking about Copilot. And
I think the majority use cases, Copilot is there. There is no question. Like, to me, if you're in an organization or you're a CISO, your engineers are going to be using it. If they're not today, actually, let me rephrase that. There's no one in your organization, if it's a decent size, that's not using Copilot. Some form of AI generated, it doesn't have to be Copilot specifically, but definitely a AI generated helping you code. That is happening. It's way too valuable. It's extraordinarily helpful across the board. It is a no-brainer. Everyone is going to be using it. Now, the question I think that people are trying to figure out the answers to is, what does that mean? Going to the point, if 4x more code is coming from engineering now, does that mean I have a 4-time bigger security problem, right?
Yep.
And I don't think that's true, but I do think there's some aspects of validity to it, and people are trying to figure out how to wrap their heads around it.
I can't tend to disagree, man. And I'll probably put a caveat to it as well. Most of the security industry is built on the thing that people don't do their job. If they actually do their actual job the right way, we probably don't need security. They encrypt shit when they want you. They reset their passwords. They have MFA. All of that.
What's the definition of the right way? What's the definition of right?
Right way, which is the ideal way, or I guess at least
For the security person, or
yeah, the right way from a security person perspective. Why we should not have a job if people actually would just do their thing. Like, I think I'm coming more from a perspective that people talk about, hey, security should work towards automating their job out. I guess we shouldn't really have a job in the first place if they were just doing their thing.
I prefer the security should be invisible versus security should not exist. Think of Apple. That's my ideal way of looking at things. Yeah, it's like the way your iPhone works. It's what you do on your iPhone.
Yeah.
On an iPhone, I would say by and large, security is not something you think about when you do things on your phone. It's just not. Yet, security is very much in an iPhone at levels deeper than 99% of most products, right? But yet you don't notice it. And I think that's the most ideal goal in life is secure. You don't think about security when you use your iPhone that much, but it's freaking there. And it's invisible, but it's not gone.
Yeah, I'm going to turn into an Apple fanboy there, and clearly we're going to lose all the Android users at this point in time. But the fact that they made Face ID as a good thing, that it's like, can you imagine how hard it was for us to even make people sign up for MFA? And they went biometric on people. And I'm like, holy shit, they accomplished something that many people in security failed for years. The reason I was pushing back on increased workload was because ideally, from a security person's perspective, you would think that if all things were followed, we should not technically have a job. The Challenges at the moment in most organizations on an average level are primarily driven by the fact that if you look at the AppSec people, they have a lot of problems because the tools at the moment give you a lot of false positives. Someone has to go through it, identify, hey, out of these 20,000 alerts that I have, which ones are actually something that I should be investigating, sending over to the developer working with them. Then the other part is the supply chain in there as well. That it's not just that we are the only ones producing code, we're using something else to produce the code for us as well. Now, with those two things in the mix and the more new code being generated, I feel at the moment, and it's not the fault of the developers, by the way. I think it's definitely the fault on our part as security, and that we are not able to keep up with this. And this was seen when the cloud came in. This is being seen when AI is here. We are like, the whole reason we have this podcast is because there was actually a need for a lot of people to stop talking about Skynet and thinking about how can a CISO actually address this problem. So I tend to lean on the fact that it is definitely going to be initially a huge amount of workload, which is where your AISPM, DLP, all of that, and the SecOps automation, all of that is going to spring up. They definitely have an opportunity and they clearly have noticed it. But I don't know on a people and process side. Technology side, I think there is definitely some answers coming, but people and process side, I think that would definitely be, let's just say, stretched thin. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the one thing I would say I noticed is I think people are tired of AI. Did you notice that at the conference?
Yeah.
They're
I sense
tired
that.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't want
Like
to
it's only taken a year and a half.
anything apart from AI. Let's talk about anything apart from AI. Is that what you got as well?
Yeah. There's a lot of, I don't want to talk about AI anymore. There's like, while we say this on the AI Cybersecurity Podcast.
It's rightly the theme, and I can understand why as well. Because I think if people go back to some of our previous episodes, they'll realize that some of the conversations we had about security would land on the fact that we didn't really have a lot of good use cases for how AI was being used. Even the vendors were trying to figure out what is the solution? What are we trying to solve here? And even right now, there is no vendor talk. And I don't mean vendor in the context of a cybersecurity vendor, in the context of there is no use case where there is an actual customer talking about an AI use case. Every product that you look at right now, whether it's Adobe, think of any product, everything, even Notion, everything has like an AI assistant now. What is it doing? How is it using? I have no freaking idea. But at least now I know that everyone is talking about it. But if you look at the AI use cases on the internet, is primarily the marketing team talking about it. But I didn't hear a Capital One or, I don't know, I'm just going to name a few companies like Robinhood or Netflix or any of them. What are you guys doing with AI? Everyone's spending millions. What are they doing?
The thing that we haven't hit yet is we haven't hit a defining moment where AI is not used as some side feature, right? Like Notion is using AI as a side feature, right? All of these people are plugging in these things as side features versus where is it that AI is completely changing the game and AI is the primary core. Like I'll give you a great example. Perplexity to me is a great example of that's not a side feature. The entire core focus of the thing is to replace Google. And by the way, for me, it does. I feel like 98% of my stuff is, I never use Google. I always use Perplexity. Never use Google anymore.
Wait, so it gives you definite answers, but then is there a verification process for the
yes. Yeah, it's so much better. You use it, right? But it's everything that I use Google for, and actually everything that I even used to use ChatGPT or Claude for in terms of just curiosity or things I want to know, I just use Perplexity because Perplexity is integrated with search. So now all of a sudden, if I want to say, hey, what's the best? I really want to see a great action movie, Spider-Man. Give me something that is in the past year. And Perplexity will give me an actual answer and it will show me, here it is, here's the resources. And I'm like, okay, it's great. These blog guys are writing about this movie, but tell me what Reddit says about it. Here's all the things about what Reddit said about this movie. And actually this movie came out above that movie based on Reddit comments, right? And so, now I don't have to do Google searches anymore. I digress. But this is an example of where I think what we haven't seen yet, but where we hopefully will see here in the next year is AI core, things that are truly focused on what does AI bring as a core solution or problem solver that's not some side feature added to an existing problem set or product. And so when I think that Robinhood may add something that's AI based, but it's going to be a plug-in into its primary use case versus if someone came out with a true AI stock trading application at core, what would that even look like? That's a whole, I don't know, that sounds scary too, by the way. but like,
I mean,
I would not recommend someone do that. But
yeah.
I think
I
that's
mean,
the reason why.
how do you define LLM firewalls, and do they integrate with access management?
Yes and no. So it's an interesting problem, right? There is this problem that says at its most simple level, I have a data store and
Yep.
I have this brain. The data gets passed to the brain, rephrases it and regurgitates it in some way. And or you talk to the brain, says this will rephrase it in a way that says this is the kind of data that I need, and then pass it to this data store. The problem is basically in the world of today, data rights are pretty simplistic but very well defined. So if I have a document that's meant for engineering, the group engineering has access to the document. Even finance has access to that document. And that is the way, and it goes into a database at which it has these permissions, or in some file store at which it has these permissions. And when that user tries to access that document, if you're in engineering, you can do it. You can access the engineering document. It's really simple. I think in LLM land, though, it becomes very different in that now people are feeding these things into vector databases, and vector databases are not as granular. And so when you say, okay, finance document gets shoved in here, an engineering document gets shoved in here, what if an engineer asks something about let's say the code for the finance application? So it goes, oh, hey, I need to understand about the current structure of Financial App 101 in terms of how it's being built. And instead it says, oh, finance, because it's a vector database and there's no permit, oh, finance structure 101, and it returns the enterprise's corporate finance answer around the structure of the organization of the corporation. And it's like, oh, that's not what should be going to the engineer. Now there's data leakage or a data rights problem. And so how do you prevent that from happening both at the data source itself, at the vector database, and also maliciously from individuals trying to get access to the finance documents, even if they're an engineer? That's the prompt injection problem. And so there is this sort of problem space that says, how do I restrict it at the data source? And then how do I restrict it at the person who's asking to play? And so I think that's the fundamental issue. And how do you solve that? LLM firewalls happen to be one way, which are targeted today at the user asking the LLM, basically saying, hey, I want to get access to the finance docs, even though I am an engineer. And so an LLM firewall should know, oh, I know what your rights are through SSO because I'm integrated into that. I also know that you are asking a question that looks like a prompt injection in what you're doing. And therefore, I may block you in order to keep that from being passed to the right orchestration place. But also, firewalls should be going between the LLM itself and the data store itself. So when the LLM or when the information gets retrieved from the data store, can you say, oh, this vector or this sort of block has something to do with finance, and the person who's asking it is an engineer. Are we sure we want to pass a finance doc to an engineer? We should probably block that from happening.
Maybe that's a good segue into the actual challenge that most people were stuck at, was the whole data security part, where people had classification that were never applied. And now people are lost basically to where, like, now there is a question of data discovery as to identifying where all the perhaps sensitive data could be sprawling across. And then there's a question of, are we even okay? There's an interesting point that someone mentioned. I was talking to, I think the individual was, I won't take their name, but they were part of the state of Nevada. And it was an interesting conversation. And the conversation was more around the fact that, hey, government has data from 50, 60, 70 years ago. Imagine if someone is actually a dedicated job to just go through 60, 70 years worth of data to identify what should be classified as public, what should be classified as confidential versus private. I mean, that's a lot of money and time and resource being spent on a data analyst person, potentially
this is super solvable problem. AI is really good at this.
Oh, yeah, but we're trying to not do the AI part with this is the pre-AI part, because
pre-AI part. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the pre-AI part. But I guess the reason, and talking about government officials as well, there was a whole conversation about US elections as well by Jen Easterly. She was talking about the whole that the critical infrastructure is very ready for most of the threats. But now this is election year in the US. I don't know what your thoughts are on the whole, because obviously you have the whole deepfake conversation we were just having before this as well.
Yeah, deepfakes was a big trend.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's getting better and better, which we knew. But now, actually, before we started this thing, Ashish and I was sharing with him that there's now open source projects where you can take one still photo of somebody and it will auto recreate a really great deep fake for puppet mastering on webcams. And it's so good. And even there's articles, because you saw like on Android, what the Pixel has, the magic editor thing, and
Yes.
that thing is phenomenal. Man, it's
Yeah.
so good. Flux came out. Do you know about Flux, Ashish?
I know about the Pixel. I didn't know what the Flux. What was the
Flux came out. It's I think it's the founders of Stable Diffusion went and started their own thing, and they launched it maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, called Flux, which is another image generation model. And it is, again, it's the next leap in image generation. It is so good. It is very good. The realism and the capability of these things now, like people are even talking about, you used to have to type in detailed prompts for things that you need. People are finding out using Flux, actually, you don't want to do that. You actually just want to actually give generic things, and it just does even a better job. I just want to see Caleb in a black t-shirt playing baseball. You don't have to do anything else, and the thing will go. And then you can say, okay, I just want him swinging, and it will keep the character exactly the same way, and it looks like a digital photo, right? Like, it's so good. And so like these things are getting so much better in its generation. It's just unbelievable.
I guess maybe that's also worthwhile saying, right? Perhaps the reason it also feels like it's going so fast is also because of social media. Not because social media is the main audience, but they are the ones who are making the popularity happen for. So if you think about the technology leaps that are happening, this image generation, video creation, that's pretty much the two big areas where the leaps are happening. We're talking about 40% code being created by GitHub. I feel like the reason why these two continue to get attention is because of social media, because we're like, because that area of our world depend on images and videos. We've always trusted. Now we've been trained in it we all ourselves have been trained for 10 plus years. And now if you see an imagery, which is going back to the election thing, like I don't need a rush email thing to happen this year. I could literally just have some presidential candidate do something, which is, to your point, swinging a baseball in a team that they don't believe in, or Democrat in a Republican jersey.
In the Flux subreddit, one of the big topics is people are using it specifically on recreating CCTV screenshots.
Oh my God.
And it's really good. Like Donald Trump buying milk out of a 7-Eleven CCTV camera. They show a random person walking an alligator down the aisle of a Walmart, right? And it just looks real. Like you can't tell. So there is now a model being made for Flux that is specifically focused just on CCTV generation.
Obviously, we primarily focus on leaders and CISOs. Some of those CISOs and leaders also have to deal with staff that is in physical location, like a bank staff or let's just say T-Mobile, for that example. They have staff that is actually standing there and looking at imagery that's coming on television that they advertise on. Is there a concern that they should, like from a physical security perspective, like there is the whole privacy question that the people obviously there, CCTV camera, the first thing that came to my mind was, hey, does that mean like courts where cases go in? If this thing becomes more realistic, I believe, at least I think I've seen the same videos as you have, they still look a bit animated, as in terms of you can tell it's not the real.
You cannot tell.
Really?
You cannot tell. No.
Oh, so if you were not in that subreddit feed and you just had to look at that video, you can't tell.
You cannot tell. It looks exactly like what you would see in a real photo. Here's the other question. Like, it's not only can you not tell, like visually, you just cannot tell anymore from an AI generated photo. Yeah, I think like when you're looking at the things, again, it depends on who the person is that created it, the way they created it, the model they created all out of. But let's just take the CCTV one.
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the ones that I saw that people are posting on CCTV image generated, you'd click on it, look at it in high detail. By the way, these generated high, but it's still CCTV quality, right? Because it has that quality of the thing. You look at it, it looks exactly like what you would see in a real photo taken from this thing. There's just no difference. And here's the thing is, it doesn't, even if you can digitally tell it's fake, which you can, right? That's clear. You can do that. it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if you digitally look at it and go, oh, this was generated by AI. The word that
It's too late
fire will have
already.
spread. It's too
Yeah,
late.
it's too late. Yeah. And I think maybe, and that's where my concern is coming from as well, because old school defacing a website, this is like much worse case scenario if defacing a brand, which primarily, by the way, all of them are social media. Yeah, but I guess it goes back to the content moderation that the platforms have to start doing. I guess I imagine they're the ones who are probably working on this, because if you look at the Telegram case that happened recently, where the person was being caught for not moderating the content being used or created, but obviously I know I'm digressing quite a bit, but I'm like coming back to Black Hat. That's for another episode. So we spoke about so far the hot topics, the AI Summit. I should probably do an honorary mention for AI Village as well. That was at DEF CON. There are definitely some interesting talks over there, so I'll check that out. We spoke about the 3 use cases, or the 2 use cases you saw, which was the GitHub commit part, the smart remediation. We also spoke about the 3 use cases that I saw with the secure gateway. We spoke about the LLM firewall, the data challenge.
Offensive security. That's a big one.
SecOps,
AI offense.
Actually, it'll be interesting. When you say offensive security, are we saying pen test automation, or are we saying
pen test automation? Yes, that is a big trend right now. Is pen test
Oh,
automation?
right. As in, but in the sense that you don't have to validate it, or actually, because to your point, there's already known patterns for SSRF. There's already known patterns for
if you look at a black box DAST web, like these things are pretty standard. You stick a bunch of crap in parameters and you determine whether it returns an error. And so, hey, AI can do this, right? Like we can navigate and do things like DAST in a much better way. I think that you're seeing a lot of focus, a lot of papers being written, a lot of startups coming around that are all claiming that they can automate 98% now of a pen tester's capabilities on web applications. And
wow,
yeah, there's a lot of that is in the current focus and trend this year, which by the way, I am very hesitant on, and I throw a lot of bunk in some of this stuff, but that is the trend.
That's the whole attack surface management market that's being created from all of that. Anyway, so to your point, so there's definitely that use case as well. I think that's most of the big takeaways. We obviously have the episode where we have the panel for the AI Summit, and definitely to get Matt on from OpenAI on for an episode as well.
We had a presentation at the CISO Summit on how to generate your own deepfakes.
Did someone create a deepfake?
Yeah, John Whaley gave a great presentation on how to generate deepfakes at the CISO Summit this year. Regarded presentation, super fun, very scary. Very scary.
So it's funny because I think the AI Summit had really interesting. So their talks were more around the NVIDIA executives giving their insights. So that's their hardware providers. And there's a fireside chat on building a cyber resilient nation in the age of AI, which is government data talks again. And then there was AI and science for security. And there was therapy for security leaders. And I'm going,
oh, that's a good one, actually. So, I bet that was well attended.
One more talk, which is worthwhile talking about, because there's a lot of them were panels. A lot of them were not talks. There were a lot of opinions. And I was saying people were talking about the trust and everything. One, which was on the last talk by Matt Knight from OpenAI. I think he was a closing keynote where he was talking about his challenge. I think that was definitely well attended as well, where he's talking about his strategic approach to this whole problem. But again, I feel there were definitely some technical breakout session, but they were more focused on, hey, how to overcome alert fatigue, then leveraging RAG for proactive cybersecurity posture. And voice cloning was another one, and the threats of AI.
What's a little bit sad here is that we are talking about what happened at BlackHat, and we have not talked or spoken, or even I didn't even attend any of the briefings. So if you really want to talk about, we're talking about BlackHat, like only I think probably 5% of the audience or attendance probably even knew about the summits or even attended the summit. Versus we have not mentioned the briefings, which is what people go there for. Did you attend briefings? Because I didn't attend any briefings. What were the AI things in the briefings? I have no idea. So there are people who are listening who are going, but there's a whole bunch of these things in the briefings that you didn't talk about at all.
Because one of the things that also came out of the conversation was that the spike of investment from organizations for, hey, here's 10 million, 20 million, do something in AI. When there is no fruitful result for a year, next year, that money pool would disappear, or at least will shrink considerably. It would may not completely go away because now it's just too big to fail, but it would shrink considerably for it to give me a use case where it makes sense instead of me just spending another 10 million on this. And you hiring every person out there on the internet say, because there are now AI engineer roles, AI security roles. I'm like, what are these people doing in actual job? I don't know if I shared that with you. I think it was an AI security engineer role. And I'm going, what does an AI security engineer do? Clearly, either they have an AI product internally, which is looking at this. So I went through the description. Again, it said you should have years of experience and all of that. I'm like, no one has years of experience in this shit. But
You need to have
I'm like,
6 years of LLM experience in order to apply for this job.
yeah, that would be something special.
There's definitely a lot of good people I have been talking to that it takes a certain skill set to really understand LLMs, fine tuning, building, putting together, applying them in workflows, knowing the nuances. And there are a very small handful, a pocket full of these people who are security engineers, right? Like they are people who are in cybersecurity, who actively are invested in this and who have a lot of knowledge around this stuff. And so there's not a lot of them, but there are definitely some really strong people out there that I have had a lot of conversations just recently within the past couple of weeks that have been really fun to talk to. That they are what I would consider an AI security engineer to be. Like
What would be
people
some
who
of
are
the traits
super
you would call
knowledgeable.
out? What would be some of the traits you would say they have that stood out for you as, oh, your thing? Because I imagine it's the way they think about a problem versus, I guess that would be the differentiator. Is that what you found?
Yeah, like they know what an LLM is good at, how to fit it to the things that they need, how to fine tune the models and run the models in the right way, the intricacies and nuances of accuracy and hallucinations. Like they really get it. Like they just get it. They know how to write a prompts in the most effective way. They understand this, but they're security people, right? These are security engineers who are trying to apply LLMs to their day-to-day jobs. And the way that they're doing it is in a really phenomenal and unique way of doing it. And it's really fascinating talking to these people. And actually, what's interesting is I find most of these people that, except for one, most of the people I've talked to who are really good at this are what you would consider to be junior, right? These are people who are 5 to 8 years in security total career wise, right? Like they are going from junior to maybe regular engineer, but they are definitely not senior IC level types of staff. These are like more junior people who have phenomenal methods and thought processes around this stuff. So like when you say AI security engineer, my head immediately went to these people. They are like, they know security, they get it, and they know really well how to use LLMs very effectively.
Interesting. Because I just found the role and it seems like they're definitely hiring quite a bit of people in this space. They're looking for an SVP, but it was an AI software engineer job. And they did ask for software engineering experience. And they called out general awareness and understanding of Gen AI tools are very helpful. But the role of the SVP, who is the Generative AI Risk and Control Senior Control Officer.
That's a mouthful.
Proven background auditing artificial intelligence and large model implementation or systems. Background in application development, which including AI or Gen AI specific applications preferred. Yeah, that's just all cloud and risk and all of that. But you just basically have to help define the enterprise-wide Gen AI risk and control framework.
What's interesting is the people that I'm talking to who I would consider to be really good at this all have jobs in various different parts that have nothing to do with AI. Like these are like, oh, I'm a red teamer, I'm a pen tester, I'm a detection analyst. Like these are all like people who are, there's one who's job, I'm a privacy engineer. Like these are not like people working on LLMs or AI functions. These are people just in their day-to-day jobs that have a passion for figuring out how to apply this to their job. And they are like super smart, very smart about this stuff.
Yeah, wow. Because it's funny because you and I recorded an episode with two people from the red team side as well, Danny Mees and Rezo, who again, to your point, nothing to do directly, but I believe Rezo works for the security team in a cybersecurity company, as a cybersecurity vendor company. But again, nothing to do with AI.
No.
But he's clearly doing a lot of time researching and working in this space as well. So there you go.
What's interesting is the person who writes the requirements for the job spec really should be more focused on the education and skill set versus the experience. I don't know, why would they put experience in working on AI technology when that's like maybe 8 months worth of time?
Yeah, well, you'll find this hilarious. So they also have a role, which is Director of Generative AI Innovation Lab. And there's over 100 applicants who applied for it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there are 100 plus people who believe that they actually have the capability to do all of this for the AI.
I would agree, because they're asking for everything, so you might as well apply, because it's not like anyone in that 100 will match it. So you have just as good of a chance as every one of those 100 that applied to it. So
yeah, because the requirement is knowledge in AI, SDLC, and ML ops platform.
yeah.
We have that automation pentest. That's definitely a field that's coming up. Then there is the part where now there are people who are looking for AI professionals to be hired in their organization, whether it's ML ops or the AI ops. And there's a whole episode, I think the first season we did on what these are and how they're different. Why Black Hat briefing, which is the talk they did, didn't have a lot of AI topics in there. And I guess going back to what we were saying earlier, maybe it's the fact that it's the vendors who are talking about it than the actual people creating these AI projects internally.
Black Hat briefings are supposed to be very vulnerability research focused, right? Yeah. Threat focused. And also they had an AI Summit. How much did they vet the presentations off? Well, you should do. But the problem is then that what you were saying is the AI Summit was very compliancy driven versus technical driven.
Yeah.
So
they had tech breakdowns, but then the tech breakdowns were not the kind of tech breakdowns you're talking about at CISO Summit, which is like deepfake. Hey, let me make a deepfake of Ashish in there kind of thing.
That's good feedback, though, for the AI Summit. Is I think the Black Hat needs some feedback around, hey, this was way too high level. We need to get some lower stuff in there.
Yeah, and I don't know if it because the attendees were supposed to be like that, because most of the attendees that I spoke to, they were technical. So it's not, they were just basically walking around having hallway chats. Hence the reason I ended up in all hallway chats as well. But in saying that, that is the final thoughts for Black Hat. But thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to that episode of AI Cybersecurity Podcast. If you are wondering why aren't we covering all topics, because maybe the field is evolving too quickly, so we may not even know some of the topics we have not covered. If you know of a topic that we should cover on AI Cybersecurity Podcast or someone we should bring as a guest, definitely email us on info@cloudsecuritypodcast.tv, which reminds me, we have a sister podcast called Cloud Security Podcast, where we talk about everything cloud security with leaders. Similar to the AI cybersecurity conversation, we focus on cloud security specifically in the public cloud environment at cloudsecuritypodcast.tv, which if you find helpful, definitely check out www.cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of AI Cybersecurity Podcast. Have a great one. Peace.